I experience it on a very regular basis. I think there's this whole sort of often there's this whole glamour lens that is viewed with entrepreneurship. Um, I don't think it is that. I think there are
Mm.
sleepless nights when you're thinking about, and also that feeling of um, loneliness even is very real.
What's that one leadership lesson you've learned that no business school really teaches?
I would say probably humility, and how important humility is probably, you go to the likes of Harvard and Wharton, and I don't think they teach you about humility, because just by definition of being there, there's nothing humble in those learning environments, because they are so there's so much that you learn. But I think humility is very, very important when it comes to businesses, or starting or scaling a business, and especially when you look at fundraising, or series A, B, and C, you'll have a room full of a lot of women. But as you go further up in the fundraising, there are very, very few women there. And I often wonder why. Is it that, we are not less capable, we are not even less driven, we are not less educated? Then where is that stemming from?
Hi, in today's episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Anuradha Gupta, Managing Director, Armis Inc., and the visionary founder, CEO of Vows for Eternity, a premium matchmaking service that has redefined how relationships are built in this fast paced world. She's also recently launched Two to Tango, a curated dating platform designed to humanize modern dating, which is really the need of the hour. So, we want to begin by asking Anuradha, let's start at the beginning. What was it like stepping into entrepreneurship as a woman and doing it all solo, especially in the field that you are in?
Hi, Mo. Thanks for having me on the show. I I actually, my first foray in entrepreneurship was when I was still in college. So that was when I really started that. And I started my first or my second startup uh, now over a decade ago, called Vows for Eternity, which is what you touched upon. And I think, like anything that we do in life, I think self-belief is really important, because that's really what goes a very long way. So that has always held me in good stead. It's always, a journey. Any journey is daunting and can be daunting, and there are always moments of self-doubt. There's always moments of, hey, the odds are stacked against me, and how far am I, willing to go? So all of those things do come into play, and they have come into play over the last decade. But I think more than anything else, I think as a woman entrepreneur, there's much I have learned over time. There are things I've unlearned. There's a lot of social conditioning that we had to unlearn, and I have within that carved my own village, people I can lean on. And I think that is, nothing happens solo, really,
Yeah,
you know.
truly. Truly. And it's really a journey, as you rightly said. So let's just talk about the emotional and social barriers that you really faced early on, considering the kind of business that I'm constantly touching upon isn't really it's an idea that people are opening up to. Especially, when I'm in India today, people are opening up to this entire idea, and loneliness is really on the rise. And so tell us a little bit about that. Like when you explained it to your close friends and family, how was the reaction, and how did you kind of work on yourself when you took this ahead?
So it's very interesting when I first mentioned it. I think you very rightly said it's only now that things are changing, but 12 years ago, this particular industry is extremely fragmented. It's very in India, now things are changing, but for the longest time, it wasn't even an organized industry per se, right? At every nook and corner, you have somebody who's into matchmaking and all of those things. But I think amongst many things that have worked for me, I think one thing also was the fact that, I was living in New York City. Matchmaking, the West has turned to matchmaking or organized sort of matchmaking in a huge way, and especially the space that I wanted to get into and the space that we have been operating in has been in the very confidential offline space. And all of that was happening in the West. It's extremely organized. It's very well received here. So I think I did not face, or I did not let a lot of those uh, almost taboos sort of get into my system because I didn't really see them. So I was sort of oblivious to a lot of those things, and that actually helped me more than anything else. And I said, we're in the professional services industry, and like executive headhunting, executive searches. This has to be this is an issue today. And you hear about that every second day. Dates that go horribly wrong. um, and I always feel that, and it started from my own experience. When you meet people online behind a computer screen, you can be anybody in the world that you want to be, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Anuradha. Yes. I mean, I had to echo this in because, the world is grappling with what they see online. And then when they meet the person, it's a totally different ball game. So tell me, yeah, sorry for, interjecting because this is so interesting for me, Anuradha, because you are actually going to help so many more people with the kind of work that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all getting to that place, and I think there is a huge shift that is happening in India, and that shift is also, socially, culturally, there's a massive change,
Yes.
and it's people are getting married later, both men and women. They're choosing to get married later. Career has been a key area of focus, and also, I think self-discovery. Earlier. I don't know what was good or bad because everything has its pros and cons in life. But earlier, people got married very young. And I think as they grew older, in a lot of instances, they outgrew each other because they realized that the person, that as people, they're not compatible because as people came into their own, they just, it didn't cut it for them anymore, right? So now with getting married later, again, everything has pros and cons. So there is a flip side of that too. But I think as one gets a little bit older, you know your mind a lot more, you know yourself a lot more. Um, and But I think the problem with that is, and of course, there's the financial independence that has now come in, which is a huge game changer when it comes to marriage, and that whole gender roles and that whole the equation has changed or is changing fairly rapidly, definitely in the larger cities in India, and globally the change has been there for a long time, so it's less relevant there. But uh, but a lot of that is changing, and I think people are, intent is really important. When people are in that headspace for marriage or a meaningful relationship, it's becoming increasingly difficult to find the person. One doesn't know where to find that person, which is what happened with me as well. I was 34 when I felt that or I was at 32 when I felt I'm ready to take this next step. And where do you find the person? Office romances don't work, and you don't want to put yourself out there like you did in your 20s anymore.
Absolutely. Yes. I'm sorry, Anuradha, I'm like constantly, like I said, because you speak to the heart of millions of women that, the older you grow, you don't want to put yourself out there. So tell me, I mean, do you remember any incident where you felt that somebody within, somebody close to you did not believe in what you were doing initially?
I mean, you always have people who are skeptics. You always have people thinking, we were very ahead of our time. 12 years ago, we were talking about freezing one's eggs, which were at that time, now it's all cool and it's all great conversations. But at that time, these conversations weren't really happening. Um, and here we were sort of saying, hey, let it take the pressure off a new relationship. Let it not define your timeline. And also decide when you are ready for marriage. Don't do it because it's an expectation, and it shouldn't be about compromise. It has to be. I mean, we all do things for people we love, but it that cannot be the basis of any meaningful relationship. So I think in that sense, but now over time, I think we have had the privilege and the honor of creating, having some meaningful, doing some meaningful work over the years and being recognized for that. And I think we are just at the right place, and it's where we are meant to be.
Awesome. So let's talk about the idea of having it all. It gets thrown around a lot. So, what has been some of the real sacrifices that you've had to make, when you embarked, on this journey?
It's a very interesting question. I'm I believe that you can have it all, but I don't believe you can have it all at the same time, right? I mean, something has to give, and I don't think I'm asked a lot, how do you balance things? And the reality is I don't balance things. I don't believe there is such thing as balance.
I
I
agree
think
with you again and again, Anuradha. I think I'm like constantly, there is no balance. Absolutely. And I think women are asked this question all the time. How do you balance things? Men are not asked this question because they don't need to balance.
true,
Sorry, please
true.
continue. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think just going back to the balance part of it, there is no balance. I think the important thing is, mm, I look at it as three main pegs, I think, or three main pillars, especially in my life. There is a professional side of things, there is a family side, and then there is a self. And these three have to intersect. And I think it's about creating harmony with how they intersect. And I think the thing is not about the balance, but it's about making sure that there's harmony that is created with this intersection. Sometimes I feel, there'll be one thing that'll be more needed. The priority needs to be, your focus at some point might be work, at sometimes it might be family, and equally at sometimes it just might be the self, right? So I have learned over time um, to prioritize. That's more a recent development. I would say probably say in the last 18 months more than anything else. It's taken me a long time to really get to this place and said, you know what? You can't pour from an empty well. I need to prioritize myself as well. And I need to take a week off and travel by myself or travel with my friends or whatever it is, and just, take that time out. Right. And in the past, that was, I don't know if that was socially that acceptable, but I think I haven't. I've always been a nonconformist, so it's been relatively easier for me to do that. But the flip side is these days, men also, I think, in equal relationships, I think men are also learning to a very great degree the extent, the art of the art of prioritizing. I mean, I think uh, socially the expectations are different, but I know that when I'm traveling or I'm away, I'm back in business school, I travel a lot. I mean, my husband does hold fort, right? He's there so that I could go and do whatever I'm doing, right? So I think it is ultimately, for anything to work, it has to be teamwork.
So, you're running multiple companies, and you're constantly on the move, you're constantly going. So, how do you kind of not forget that young girl from Nainital, who grew up in the mountains and in the hills and now is in another part of the world? How do you keep yourself connected to, the person that Anuradha really is?
I think taking time out, important, introspection, extremely important, uh, and feeling consciously and working on, all being connected. As any tree, if your roots are not well connected to the earth from where you come, it's a huge tree, but it's going to topple over. So I think that connectivity to your roots, to whatever you feel defines you, and over a period of time, that definition changes too, but there are some things you that stay with you, right? And I think it's very important to, for all of us, to find what those things are, and stay true to those, because that's in effect staying true to yourself, I think.
So, Anuradha, just to tell you a little bit about myself, like I run a business which, and I also write, as an author. There's a huge amount of isolation, right? So, have you ever struggled, with isolation, especially given the work that you do?
you know um, Isolation, I have experienced it, and I experience it on a very regular basis. I think there's this whole sort of often there's this whole glamour lens that is viewed with entrepreneurship. Um, I don't think it is that. I think there are sleepless nights when you're thinking about, you start something new, you're thinking about how are you going to make payroll. You think about, a problem at work. You think about, markets are changing. There is so much unpredictability, and you always, so you are the last person to get paid. You are the first person to have to put your hands up and say, I'm in this. I'm going to figure this out. And I think there is a so I think isolation, that feeling of isolation, sometimes the feeling of not being understood, and also that feeling of um, loneliness even is very real. There are so many occasions that you end up missing, some knowingly because something else has taken priority, and you have to roll up your sleeves and say, I need to do this because ultimately I'm the captain of the ship. And some a lot more unknowingly. I missed my daughter's first tooth when it fell out, and I still remember it, right? I mean, she probably doesn't, and it probably didn't matter to her. And she told me that on a FaceTime call, but it gave me that, that in my heart, I felt that sting, right? And so as we are talking, that's the first thing that comes to mind. There are a lot of things that you are not there for, whether it's sacrifices or not. I don't know, but there's certainly a lot of things that you miss out. But then on the other hand, a lot of things that you are working towards. And I have a son and daughter, and I feel that there's a sense of maybe they'll learn from osmosis, how important things like integrity, commitment, dedication, discipline, hard work really are. So,
Absolutely.
you know.
Yes.
So we're all working women, and I think every day we get up and we do the best that we can. And sometimes it's enough, and there are days when it isn't enough.
Yes. So, what's that one leadership lesson you've learned that no business school really teaches?
I'm back in business school. I'm in Harvard right now currently. So there's a lot that I'm learning from school again. But I think ultimately, I would say probably humility, and how important humility is probably, you go to the likes of Harvard and Wharton, and I don't think they teach you about humility, because just by definition of being there, there's nothing humble in those learning environments, because they are so um, there's so much that you learn. But I think humility is very, very important. It is, I don't think it's been my strength, and it's very much work in progress. But I think that's something I'm learning to embrace, and do better with it. I
No,
think that's a,
I think it's a big strength because for someone to even come onto an interview and say that about herself is such self awareness, Anuradha. So kudos to you. I mean, amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the traditional gender roles. They are shifting, like we just spoke about in the initial part of our conversation, right? So how do you really see this playing out in modern relationships, where today women are becoming more aware about their own careers, and you spoke about egg freezing. So, you know, being in the work that you're in, have you seen anything that's really new to you that you would like to share with our listeners?
I mean, every this decade is new. It's very different, and I think earlier this whole, I think we also at some point need to revamp the definition of generation. It's not a decade anymore. I think now every 5 years is a generation gap, right? So I think there is the only thing that I would perhaps sort of stress on is you know it's very important for people, for individuals, for couples to define, um, what equality means to them, right? And I think, uh, is it is it is it competition? Is it, can I do this better than you? Is everybody vying for the same thing, or are people working on what their strengths are? In a relationship, like in a team. In a team, you work on whatever your strength is, and somebody else does whatever, whatever you're really good at, right? So I think that I think there are, if you go back, generations, it the divorce rate was low, but it didn't necessarily equate to happier marriages. It was
No,
just taboo,
absolutely.
and you didn't really know, you financially, you didn't know where to go, what to do, so you sort of played along with it, you carried on with it because that was it, right? And that was for the long haul. So I think those things have changed now, and I think it was much needed. It's a more level playing field, but I always look at both pros and cons. I think for us as women, financial independence is still a new thing.
It is.
We are still figuring it out.
Mhm.
I don't think we are still that comfortable,
Mhm.
with that concept. And I think it's very often that we can almost throw it back at the other person. I don't know of a man who throws the or being financial independent, in a relationship as an exit, right? Or to reduce the level of tolerance. But I think we are figuring that one out. So I think that is a little bit work in progress. And I think both people need to work towards each other, take steps towards each other and help figure it out. But the other part that I find is that, when it comes to businesses, or starting or scaling a business, and especially when you look at fundraising, or series A, B, and C, you'll have a room full of a lot of women. But as you go further up in the fundraising, there are very, very few women there. And I often wonder why. Is it that, we are not less capable, we are not even less driven, we are not less educated? Then where is that stemming from? Are we more risk averse? Are we scared to take that plunge? Or do we just not have that level of support that is needed from the family, from the society, to say, hey, I got you, do this, you know and so I think that is something that I think about often, and wonder why it's nowhere near equal, right? It's that is something that bothers me quite a bit.
But I really think, like you said, it's work in progress. It's just a matter of time that women will start becoming absolutely, conversant in financial language and becoming very comfortable, negotiating their salaries, their whatever they think it's worth for them to be paid for a job. And I do believe, because I do, living in India now, I do work with many women, and I think they are beginning to realize that financial independence is one of the greatest things of honoring yourself in relationships
Yeah.
too. Yeah, so Anuradha, we're going to talk a little bit about, mental and emotional wellness. So, how do you really incorporate that within the company culture? Tell me a little bit about how do you take your team forward in all of these things.
So I think it really, I mean, you have to send, I think it really is about setting the tone that always has to come in most companies from the top. And so we have a team which is geo-dispersed. There's no clocking in and clocking out. Everybody knows what they need to be doing. And I think it's very important to be able to find that time to sure, you feel passionate, you're driven about the work that you do, but at the end of the day, all of that only makes sense when you have the right people to share your success with.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
think, that mental well-being, emotional well-being, that is key. So whether that is taking some time out, whether that is going out for a lunch in the middle of on a Monday morning, depending on how how you structured your day, time management is really important. Empowering your team is really important. But I think it's also about, when you empower the team, it's also about making the right choice, empowering the right people.
Yeah.
I think that is ultimately key, because you can also empower the wrong set of people and
Yeah.
everything starts crumbling.
That's
So
also a journey, Anuradha.
it is a journey, but also
Yeah.
it's about sort of recognizing that um, there are very many parts to us all, whether men or women, and it's very important to connect them through our different threads. And every family has its own own timelines, right? That's going on socially, culturally, personally, professionally. So I think empowering teams is critical.
So let's do a rapid fire right now, Anuradha. What's something people often get wrong about the entrepreneurial life? Maybe one word.
That is glamorous.
What's one word that defines your journey so far?
I think I'm a seeker.
What's one fear that's turned into your biggest strength?
Fear of failure.
What's the biggest myth about matchmaking that you'd really like to debunk?
That it's about arranged marriages.
Thank you so much for taking out the time and being on today's show. You are a change maker, you're a trendsetter, and it has been an absolute honor to have you on our episode today, Anuradha. Thank you so much for taking out the time. We wish you all the best. And really, this is the need of the hour. And in India, I hope that we have many more, interactions with you so that people know that there is always a second chance in life.
There always should be. Everybody deserves a second chance. So thank you again for talking to me. Thank you for having me here. Thanks.
Thank you so much.